question for a congressman. We have a congressman to answer that question from California, the Congressman Darrell Issa joining us now. Actually, he's in Washington, but he represents the good people of California. Congressman, is it conceivable that Congress would ever pass a law knowing what all the things we thought were inconceivable before that have happened over the past 6 months that would give government control over the banks?
You know, 2 years ago, I would have said it's inconceivable. Today, I'd say it's likely and probable.
Wow.
You know, the amazing thing is, here on Capitol Hill, sometimes on both sides of the aisle, they want to use the term predatory lending. The federal government today, in not being willing to unravel from those banks who can show that they don't need the money and that they want to return it with reasonable interest, return to the American people the risk that was foisted on them, or in some cases they asked for, by not taking it and asking them, demanding that they do certain things. That's predatory lending.
Absolutely.
The deal is being changed exactly the same as a mob loan. And that's the problem we have, is government is asserting its absolute power, in this case with Secretary Geithner. But to be honest, they asserted a lot of power when they did all their deals under Paulson, and it was wrong then, it's wrong now. But I'll tell you, the people that will stand up to the president and the majority here, we're a small minority. We're a little more than a third right now. As a result, I believe that they can almost do anything subject to the men and women in black robes that I'm pointing to, because that's about the only hope for the Constitution.
You're talking about the Supreme Court, but let's just bring an example. We just talked to a banker from Centra Financial. They had to pay an APR for their warrants of 60%. I mean, if any credit card company, we're going to have this credit card hearing tomorrow, if any of the credit card companies tried to charge 60% on their loans, you know, they'd be run out of town on a rail. But here the government's doing exactly that.
Well, absolutely. And, you know, 60% for a one-day loan may not be so bad, but as the days tick off, it turns into basically mob-type money. And that's what's really happening. But the important thing is not the 60%. It's the fact that there is not a process for private entities to be private again, because there's this urge here in Washington to make sure that no CEO makes more than $500,000, that every bank is lending the right money to the right people. And what's so scary about it is, when you look at the seed of how we got in this trouble, it was about not enough lending to the underserved in inner city. And that's where these programs began. That's where the federal dollars came in. And that's how we got to where we are. We're just going right down that road again if we're telling banks who to lend to because, quote, it's our money, it's our bank. That happens in Egypt. It shouldn't happen in the United States.
But you and I have talked about this for months. We saw it coming, that once politicians got their hands on financial institutions, they have their political goals, whatever it happens to be, whether it's lending more money to the car companies, lending more money out in general, and they use their management control over the banks to pursue those political goals.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And one thing that's an old truism here in Washington is money chases power and power chases money. In this case, what you have is the power of the government literally taking the money, taking it by giving it, but really taking the money. And this power grab, this huge power grab, is heading us, and I don't want to use the word socialism, but it's heading us toward the kind of America that we don't recognize, and the kind of America in which enterprises are distorted in a way that squeezes out the private sector. And if you'll bear with me, right now you've got California, Bill Lockyer and Barney Frank actually trying to take over an underwriting of $1.6 trillion worth of state paper, because there's a theory that that's going to somehow lower the cost to the states. Well, anything that lowers the cost is good, except for one thing. Do we really need to take on another $1.6 trillion of debt and encourage states to keep spending rather than look for ways to cut cost?
No, we don't. But the final question, Congressman, I can tell they're trying to blow you out with that machine behind you. But
they are. They really are.
I just got to ask, what can you do? You say you only represent about a third of the consensus in Congress. There is the Supreme Court. Do you think they would back you in any way to try to stop some of this?
Well, I think many of us in Congress believe that there's going to be a day in which we may have to go in to the court, which we have a right to do as members, to plead a specific case. But for right now, the tide is beginning to turn in some interesting ways. I was in New York City today, and in Brooklyn, both representatives of the state and the city of New York came in to basically tell us all the things that were wrong in that $800 billion stimulus, and mostly what was wrong was it isn't going to stimulate, it wasn't new money, and it isn't even trackable. So we're beginning to see the fallout in a way that I think is going to cause at least center-left and center-right members to join a coalition that could give us a majority to stop the craziness.
That'd be an interesting coalition. Congressman Darrell Issa, keep us updated on what's happening. Thank you very much. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Well, we want